Hello and welcome into another set of notes. Today our lessons are focused on the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, and this is an interesting period of time just because we're seeing a lot in the way of changes in the way people are thinking. The way that I like to categorize this time period is it's the beginning of the age of revolutions, but these revolutions are mainly the revolutions of thought. So before we go forward, let's go back. The Middle Ages, or the medieval approach to the world. Okay? Again, we have talked about this time period a lot. We've talked about that as it kind of leads into the Renaissance. And again, the same ideas kind of are applied here. The Middle Ages is very much based on religious belief, tradition, any sort of ancient Greek or Roman idea that existed in the world at that point in time. Those ideas are used to explain the world. The Catholic Church, on the other hand, we see preaches about these ideas. So again, with there being very few sources of information during this time, and the church being kind of the central meeting place and the central area to disseminate or distribute information, the church tells people about what's correct, and if you question those things, you could get punished for that. Okay? That you could be punished for being a heretic, someone that questions the church. A good example of this is thinking about like something as simple as saying bless you after you sneeze. That kind of comes about the common wisdom with that is that, okay, well, at the time, traditionally, people would say it because they thought that your soul was being expelled from your body briefly, or you're expelling demons by sneezing. We now know that it's just a reaction to some sort of allergen or some sort of other infection or something else that's an irritant to your nasal passages. So you're sneezing to get rid of that. Again, questioning that could be something that could gain you the title of a heretic, though, back in the Middle Ages. You can really think about this, though, when it comes to ideas with the universe. At this time, again, the universe we're using to really talk about the solar system in particular. And there's these two main ideas. The geocentric theory is this idea that comes from Greek scholars. It had been taught by the church for a long period of time. And the idea here with this is that it is a system that is very much in line with church teaching. That if God created humans and created the earth, then therefore, since we're there, humans, okay, that the earth must be at the center of the universe and everything revolves around us. The problem with this is it doesn't necessarily accurately fit with the movement of the planets in the night sky. And we see, again, this idea with the earth at the center is, again, more so guided by this idea of heavenly bodies moving in a circle around earth. It fits more with church teaching and tradition. The heliocentric theory is this other idea that we now know to be true with the sun at the center of the solar system and that things move around it. Copernicus comes up with this idea or this theory. He's inspired by Greek astronomers and their theories, but there's also this undertone of these ideas that the sun is at the center of the universe that kind of get washed out. He ends up recording his findings and basically finds that there's pretty good evidence that the sun actually is at the center of the universe. And basically because Copernicus is afraid of the church, decides not to publish them basically until like right before he dies. He's on his deathbed. He finally shares his findings because he's not afraid of getting punished by the church at this point in time. The one thing, though, that's a problem, though, is Copernicus could not figure out why the planets were moving the way they did in the night sky. If you think about it, and you can kind of look at the cursor down here, the idea of the planets moving, if you're tracking it across the night sky, it would do this weird thing where it would kind of stop and it would go backwards and then forward. And this kind of loop, so to speak, was a problem because circular objects wouldn't do that. Now we know, right, thanks to other astronomers that looked at that, it's because the planets have elliptical orbits, okay, that they travel around, okay, in more ovular or oval-shaped circles instead of a perfect circle. Okay? And of course, they're moving around the sun as opposed to moving around the Earth. So now we enter in Galileo, and Galileo is a very interesting individual. Very intelligent. He's credited for creating kind of the first modern telescope. And he uses his telescope to make observations, scientific observations, that he looks at things in the night sky, writes them down, and then makes judgments based off of those observations. He saw that the moon had these jagged edges, that the sun had sunspots. He finds out that Jupiter has 4 moons, much more than that, but he finds 4 of Jupiter's moons at that point in time, and discovers a bunch of different things about the night sky that we previously did not know. His discoveries are also evidence that the heliocentric theory is in fact true. Okay? Now that he has seen these things in the night sky, has charted them, and published these findings, it's seen as an attack on the church. Why? Because it's going against what the church is saying. And the church really gets worried about this. Why? Because if they are in fact wrong, based on Galileo's teachings, is it going to cause people to lose their faith? Okay? If the church was wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? People could start questioning about heaven, right? Or the role of like the priest. What else could they be lying about? It starts to get the church very, very worried. And the Pope decides that in order to try to stem this problem, he requires Galileo to recant, okay, or take back his beliefs. And Galileo does, mainly because he does not want to get executed. It's not that he doesn't believe in those things anymore. He just knows that if he does not publicly take back what he said, he will be sentenced to death. So he takes those back and is sentenced to house arrest, essentially, for the rest of his life. Which is a big thing at the time because, again, you are basically alienating yourself from the rest of society, that you are ostracized. Despite this, we see the building of science moving forward. This scientific revolution, right, thinking about the night sky, using observations, starts to really build and build and build. And we see other individuals, other parts of the world really start to seize on this as well. The revolution basically leads to the development of a couple different things. You have the scientific method that is created by René Descartes, right, and Sir Francis Bacon. Okay? We look at this and we start to see this shift. Okay, and the scientific method really comes from this idea, and you probably all understand this from your science class, right? You take observations on something, then you come up with a question. Okay? You research it to figure out, all right, are there existing solutions to this before then, right, hypothesizing or formulating, okay, an educated guess on what's going on before you experiment with that, right? You either accept or reject your hypothesis and you draw conclusions that you can then report out and share with others. This is the basis for modern science moving forward to where it is at present day. Again, if you are in school, you are doing this in your science classes. This really comes about because you have Bacon that's urging scientists to go through this experimentation process. He says, okay, well, this idea that medieval thinkers are just kind of taking Aristotle and these other ancient Greek and Roman philosophers and thinkers at face value, that's problematic. You need to experiment and see the results for yourself before you draw conclusions. And Descartes really also advocates for a lot of this too, saying, okay, in order to come up with solutions to find basic truths, you need to use logic. You need to use math and reason. Okay? You need to use things that are backed by science, okay, to find what truth is. You also have individuals like Isaac Newton, right, that come about during this time. And Isaac Newton really starts to push the bounds of other areas of science like physics. He develops what's known as the theory of motion, this idea between physical bodies and the forces that can be acted or act upon it. Okay? Motion's a response to those forces. He also comes up with laws related to gravity, okay? And there's always this story of like apple falling from the tree and hitting Newton on the head that comes like, it's like this anecdote for this theory. Again, the idea is that there's some sort of force of attraction on Earth. And this force of attraction between objects in general, all right, celestially, all right, out in space, is related to their mass. So when something is bigger, okay, it will increase that force of attraction to move those items closer together. Basically what this is that saying that objects fall because gravity is pulling them or attracting them to the surface of the Earth. The Earth is the bigger object. Any of those objects, okay, are smaller than Earth. So, and the smaller it is, the lighter it's going to fall. He posits the bigger the object, the faster it falls, okay, this idea of gravity, okay. He's got lots of other views, things about the outlook of the universe, okay, this idea that it's like this mechanical clock. Still, we see things with an infusion of God or some sort of other heavenly force. Again, calling God a clockmaker that sets everything in motion. But he still also believes that you can express these things in mathematical terms, all right? Again, this idea that math will get you to the truth is still present, even when it's still connected to some sort of religious tie-in at this time. We see medicine and chemistry also really take off at this point in time. Instrumentation is a big thing here, okay? Microscopes, barometers to measure atmospheric pressure, thermometers with temperatures, okay? We start to see these used to try to get better observations, going back to this idea of the scientific method being really important, okay, and this idea of observations being really important to that process. Right? You've got a couple of different people here, okay, Vesalius, who was a master of anatomy, focused on the body. You have Edward Jenner, okay, who comes up with the first vaccination for smallpox, which is a huge deal. You also have someone like Robert Boyle, and says that, right, there are many different little particles that make up matter, that make up stuff, okay? And then basically comes up with what becomes known as Boyle's law, with this idea of, okay, volume and temperature, pressure, all these different things related to particulate matter. So why do we care about the scientific method? And why do we talk about the scientific revolution in general? This basically comes down to a number of features. And those features essentially are that it is part of this larger change that we've seen basically since the Renaissance. We're seeing the decrease in power of the church. Not only did we see it politically with some of the issues related to the Reformation and then the absolute monarchs that we've talked about in these notes. And if you need more information on that, please feel free to go back to some of the other sets. But it's a decrease in power of the church too. Now more intellectual or scientific power moving forward. We see less of a reliance on religion overall. We're not accepting ideas for what they are. We're not accepting superstitions. We're trying to pursue new ideas and find instruments that will help us to learn, right? And that's something that's going to continue moving on. We're not just able to learn everything. We need to continue to learn. Next section, we'll talk about how this really changes and the revolution of thought shifts from more of science to more social sciences, things like philosophy and political science. So please join us again for part 2 here as we go forward. Thanks.